Hi everyone, welcome to the 69th episode of the Zicast. As always, I'm your host Ryan Zicast, and today I'm joined by journalist Julia Barcello.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, I'd like to shout out episode 60 guest Shannan Harrison for technical directing. So Julia, you know what I do here, I interview people and get to know them better. I know that's kind of your job, so how about we start things off and you just tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a journalism major at Quinnipiac. I'm the current news director for Q30 Television, former executive producer of the Newscast and associate producer of the Newscast. Yeah.
Awesome, and where are you from?
I'm from Greenwich, Connecticut.
Perfect. And so Q30 is the student-run media organization for Quinnipiac, to explain that for those who don't know. So how will we kick things off and start getting into our topics? And you tell us where your passion for journalism stems from.
I've always really loved journalism. I've always just loved storytelling. Ever since I was little, I would do our elementary school, like, Good Morning News. The once in a while that we did do it, I would love to anchor that. So ever since then, I think that's really when I learned that this was what I wanted to do. I've known I wanted to do journalism since I was young. I also grew up performing, so that really helped me being able to have the confidence to talk in front of a camera and do all of that. I always say if I didn't do that, I don't think I'd be as comfortable doing what I do now.
By performing, you meant like doing like theater and things like that?
Yeah, so I grew up dancing and playing piano, actually. So that really helped me kind of adjust to doing things in front of people, which I think has also grown my passion for just being in front of a camera and stuff like that.
Perfect. And like you mentioned doing the news when you were in school. Did you ever like have any communications programs like at your schools or?
So I want to say more in high school. That was when I started to really explore journalism. I joined our news show there. We did like one pre-recorded episode a month. But that was really where I started to have a passion for real broadcasting and making videos and telling stories, even if those were small stories, especially in high school.
Yeah.
That really helped me launch my passion for journalism.
Was there a specific moment from any of those stories that like really was like, oh, I want to do this in college or beyond?
I don't think I can think of a specific moment in high school. I think it was always something that I really liked to do. Funny story. I started in sports. Many people know me as like the news girl, news head. That's what I do now. But in high school, that was kind of the easier way for me to start doing things. So I think having that almost adrenaline rush of like going to the field and recording videos for these teams and kind of becoming the head of the broadcast program at my high school, that leadership and that adrenaline rush in a way, if you will, I think that's what really showed me what I wanted to do.
And how would you say it like creates an adrenaline rush?
I think I can explain that better now with what I do at Quinnipiac. I mean, breaking news is an adrenaline rush of no other. Obviously, the breaking news is never really good news, but the adrenaline rush of making sure that you're telling people what's happening and that you're putting other people in a position where they can say, okay, I'm more comfortable. I know what's going on. I mean, an example of this is earlier this year when Quinnipiac received that bomb threat, the pipe bomb threat in the student center. That was our first show back, actually, which was a lot for the first week of school. But I think in a moment like that, you're very much just trying to put out as much information as you possibly can to reassure people. And that's what you have to think of it. How you have to think of it at the end of the day is you're doing it to help people. You know, I was thinking about like the parents whose kids are here. I was thinking about my parents who were texting me asking if I was okay. So it's stuff like that where it's just like you're helping people in a way that's not really thought of.
That's a fascinating way to frame it because like news is really about the narrative of the story, and to shape the narrative is a way to assure people during an uncertain time. It's like it's also crazy knowing what the pipe bomb actually was someone taking a heater. So it's wild to think that, and like kind of take us into, because I forgot that was like the first story back, take us into like that whole thing, because that is like one of the crazier news stories that come out of like that I can remember here in my time here.
Yeah, me as well. I mean, I'm in my senior year of the 3+1, so we've had breaking news in the past, but honestly, not that I've seen to that extent. You know, that was something I wasn't anticipating. I think my other experience in journalism and in reporting has helped me in my classes here, obviously, alongside other stuff that I've done for the newscast. I think that experience really also showed me that this was what I wanted to do. As I said before, I really started to look at it from a perspective of you're doing this and telling people who aren't here what's happening. We had news stations local news stations reaching out to us, asking us if we could give them info because they couldn't get onto campus. And I was talking to some of my friends who were with me there after the fact, who were helping me cover it. And we were kind of saying how in that moment, we weren't even thinking, like, we weren't even scared. Like, we didn't even have time to process what was actually happening. We were just thinking, okay, I need to talk to this person. Like, we have to figure out what's going on and how we're reporting it on Twitter. Or X, sorry. But
different times.
Then it was X. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so we were talking about how we didn't even really feel anything in that moment. Like, my parents, my dad and mom were texting me, asking me if I was okay. I'm like, yes, I'm okay. Of course I know what's happening. I'm the one saying what's happening. But I think it was just really, like, it was a big experience to cover something of such importance to so many people. And I had professors telling me after the fact too, saying that they were watching the Q30 News tweets come up on their feed, and they were saying, you guys handled it very well. And to be told that also from your professors is always very reassuring, that you covered such an intense topic well. It's difficult. That was my first time covering such a big breaking news event that was so meaningful, because we didn't know if it was true or not. It was just a reported threat, so we obviously had to report as if it was true. I remember distinctly walking back onto campus, and shout out Connor Core. I was with Connor walking into the student center, and we saw Connor is the former news director, obviously. So yes. We both kind of snapped into that, oh my gosh, what is going on? We were walking back into the student center, and we saw all the students, everyone getting evacuated. Pub safety started to flood in, and we were like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And it was on a Wednesday, and our show is Wednesday nights. So I was starting to freak out. At first, I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? This can't be good. Because it's rare that you see that happen. So then I reached out to our public relations here at Quinnipiac, trying to figure out what was going on. And obviously, they're not allowed to tell the media anything until a certain point in the day, after they figure out what's happening themselves. We had the camera equipment with us already from filming something earlier. So thankfully, we were able to whip it out and start recording immediately and getting content right away. And I just remember posting on Twitter, breaking news, there's a pipe bomb reported. And we found out eventually what it was through the original Yik Yak post, which is crazy. Now we check Yik Yak all the time for news, because that's where a lot of stuff that you wouldn't really think is found. But yeah, that experience was just like being so careful with what you're saying when tweeting a breaking news is also so important. Because like I said, there's people who aren't here who are reading that in a safety way. Like I said, honestly, the biggest thing for me was thinking about the people's families who weren't here, who were probably really worried. I mean, I know my parents were worried about what was happening, but I wasn't in the headspace to even consider what was happening.
And Yik Yak, that's like a social media app for those who don't know. It's kind of brain rotty, but I guess for in your case, it was. It
is pretty brain rot, as you said, but that's where you find a lot of the information. So.
Yeah. And you brought up like your professors noticing your work. I'm sure that's, like you mentioned, like very validating. And also something else I noted was like the framework, is that you said you weren't scared. You were kind of like you had like your game face on.
Yeah. I've noticed it carrying into a lot of my life, which is pretty interesting. But when you're in a situation like that where you know that this threat could very well be real, it's when you look at it from like not a journalist's point of view, and you're just an everyday person just walking into the student center and you hear that, like, that is terrifying. At first I was scared, but you kind of snap as a journalist. I feel like you just snap into this moment of, okay, I need to figure who, what, where, when, and why. Like,
Yeah.
those are always, like, the first things that come to my mind now. Even if I'm not working and I see a
Yeah.
police car on campus, I'm like, what is going on?
Hmm.
And I think that also comes with just getting yourself so involved in the world of journalism that your brain kind of gets, like, this auto program
Yeah.
to just constantly being like, okay, who, what, where, when, and why. And that was kind of just what happened. And I was so focused and so zoned in on what was going on and focused on telling the story, telling the breaking news the right way with as much detail as I could possibly get. So you kind of just don't have time to process any emotions that are going on.
Interesting. Would you say you've always been like kind of curious in this way, or curious mixed with bold, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, my parents always say, like, ever since I was little, I've had that kind of curious mind. I've always just wanted to know everything that was going on at all possible moments. So that's definitely where that came from. I've just always been like this, and that helps me a lot in journalism.
Interesting. And you mentioned like at the moment, like tweeting on X. I think of like, you like sports reporters when they're
Yeah.
like, when like, let's say like free agency or something's going on and there's like constantly typing. Was that kind of like what the experience was like?
It was very similar to that. I have most of my friends are in sports journalism, so for me it was kind of that. It was the same kind of situation, however, with very high stakes.
Yeah, because you have to be first, but you also have to be accurate. But it's also a severe or a very serious situation. It's like all those factors. Was that like kind of nerve wracking, like before pressing?
It was very nerve wracking. I'm pretty sure, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Q30 News was the first to tweet anything on social media about it because I happened to be at the right place at the right time. If I was off campus, I don't think I would have been the first person to get it out. But so we tweeted it out first, and eventually the Quinnipiac Chronicle, which is a student newspaper on campus, they saw it, and then we started to eventually just work together. We were tweeting separately, but we did an article we did an article together for both of our web pages just because it was such a big event that we tag teamed it.
Yeah, and it also shows like the ramifications of what like is like thinking about what I said is like trying to be get the story out, is that the fact that it was like it all started from a joke
Yeah.
that turned into something way, way worse. And I like how much you cover like covering news for Q30. So do you mind telling us more about that and like really more of what you enjoy about that?
Yeah, so I think with Q30 in general, it is just a great experience. It's such real world experience. We are student journalists are journalists, and I think that has to be remembered by a lot of people. We're covering stories that local reporters are covering, which is crazy to think about because it's not something that I feel people really realize. But the real world experience that you get from student media is so important, and it has helped me so much in so many aspects of my life and in other internships that I've had. I think that I just really like doing what I do, and being able to do that so much as a student is so rewarding in a sense because we have 3 days roughly to put out a package for the newscast on Wednesday, or an article, whatever you choose to do. So being able to go out and talk to politicians and talk to local leaders, talk to anyone from the university, even if that's just a focus on another student org, a feature of a sort, stuff like that, it's so interesting, and it provides you, like I said again, with that real world experience that I feel I wouldn't have if I didn't do student media.
Any stories in particular that you've done, or interviews or features that really stand out to you outside of the pipe bomb?
Outside of that story, I want to say outside of Q30 as well, in my past internship, I interned a few years ago, I want to say at this point, with a local newspaper, the Greenwich Sentinel, and I was an intern there for a few years. I wrote stories for their paper, very local news, but there I had the opportunity to interview and do a story on Vivek Ramaswamy when he was running for president a couple years ago. I think I was 19 when I was doing that, which when I had received that assignment, I was so confused. I was like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm a 19-year-old intern who has not covered that much at that point. So that being given that experience was really so. It just it just changed the way my mind thought about what I wanted to do, and if that makes any sense. I think that moment was really, okay, this is what I want to do. Like, I know I want to do this. Going to this event, he held an event in Greenwich, and I was able to go as press and cover the event as press, and interview Vivek one-on-one, which was, I think to this day, that is the biggest interview that I've done. I did not think I would be interviewing a presidential candidate at 19 years old. I still don't understand how I did that. But that was such an amazing experience to have as an intern, and I like political journalism. So that really just showed me further that this was what I wanted to do. It was such a movie-like experience for me at that point, because I had never done anything like that before. I've covered stories, but not to that extent. So that was a really rewarding experience. And I also think that not to off track, but that also showed me how important it is to find people and an employer who trusts you. Because to be trusted by my boss at 19 to go cover this huge story when they could have sent someone else who was more experienced than I was, that is so important in this world. And that really helped me get to that story. But I think another story that I really liked that I did was when Falcon's Pizza, which was the local pizza next to the gas station on Whitney Avenue, I believe.
Yes.
Whitney. When they got shut down, I did a whole investigative piece on what happened, and then I did a video story following when their new occupant reopened this year. So I think those two were pretty cool. I'm trying to think of another video piece that I did, but those I think are like some of the bigger ones that I've really liked.
Yeah, and with Vivek, was that like a sit-down interview, like a...
So he held an event, or fundraising event in Greenwich. I'm pretty sure it was a fundraising event in Greenwich. And so he had a speech and all this, so I was able to go in and listen to the speech, and then I was able to interview him one-on-one afterwards, which was incredible.
I remember one day I was sitting in on Newscast, and didn't you interview someone very notable, and then didn't they like pass away a week later?
Joe Lieberman, a former senator. Yeah. I believe a former senator. I really should know this. And then he did pass away a week or so later, so we had never ended up airing the story out of respect, because we didn't have time to air the story at that point, and then he passed away, so we never aired it. But he was one of the other notable people that I've spoken to. Another really, now you got me thinking about all my politics stories, but another political story I did that I really liked was this past summer. I did an exclusive with 2 Quinnipiac students who were at President Trump's rally when the attempted assassination happened. So I received a tip, and I got their contacts, and I was actually on my way to the airport, and I'm in the car with my family, and I'm like talking to them on the phone, getting this trying to get this exclusive out. So like I said again, Q30, if it wasn't for Q30, I would not be getting these real world experiences of having these exclusives and all of that. So that was another really interesting piece I did.
Yeah, and the political topics are interesting just because of the climate at times. And do you kind of feel like a sense of weight to it, if that makes sense?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, sometimes when you are covering those bigger stories, it's very challenging to find that moderate path and make sure you're reporting just the facts and no opinion whatsoever. The thing that I've really learned with these things is people will find an opinion, whether it's right or wrong, and people will say something good or bad, no matter what you cover, no matter how you're covering it, someone is going to not like it. So I think that that's also something that I've really had to adjust to and learn. Q30 News during the election season in November, we did a 45-minute election special. So I did a live interview with a Quinnipiac political science professor, and we had 2 other anchors on the desk. So covering that 45-minute election special the day after the election happened was a lot. And that also really showed me that people just there's going to be people who don't like what you do no matter what. So talking about the weight that it can have on you on a personal level, yes, it's very much existent. But that's where the whole having a balance of work and life come into play, and making sure that you have that kind of escape, and making sure that you don't get too sucked into what you're doing, and you're able to kind of realize it's just work at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that reminds me that Newscast covered the election. I remember seeing that. I'm like, oh, it's like Christmas for Newscast.
Yeah, it was.
Do you mind telling us more about that?
Yeah, so that took a lot of planning. At that point in time, I was also an intern with WFSB TV. So I had I had interned the election night, which was that Tuesday. I was there until like 11:30 or so, and then I came back here, and then the next day we did the election special, which was a lot. That was a long week for me, but I really enjoy covering politics and financial news, so that was I really just enjoyed doing that. But the election special was great. I mean, we had numerous packages, which are like video stories, done by people across Q30, which covered local politics, and then we went to the state level. So we had divided the show up by local versus state news, and then national news. And then we also had a financial segment on how the election was going to impact the economy. So having that opportunity to even do something like that is great. And we had a lot of exclusives with a lot of politicians across the state, on the local level, state level, and we heard from voters too, which was a great addition to it. And being able to do the live interview, I'm forgetting on his name, but being able to do the live interview was also great.
Because was it like if I'm not mistaken, like a live stream that like ran the whole time?
Yes. So we were able to get Sean Duffy. Thank you, Sean Duffy. We were able to get him to come on to the show live, which was fantastic. So we did the live 45-minute show on a Wednesday night, which was great. It was a great experience to do it live. I think it being live really made a difference, because you can't mess up. Yeah. You can't mess up. So, yeah.
Cause, I mean, you mentioned like adrenaline rush. I'm sure like the live show during that stakes, was that like the highest point of that?
Yeah, so we do a live show every week. So that at this point was nothing new to me. It was, I'd never done a live interview like that before though, about such an important topic. And that's where I say again, like, there's always going to be people who don't like what you do, no matter what. And I think that's where you find that kind of, you have to like it enough to just get past it.
That's really what it comes down to, like with anything you do. If you love it enough, those bad things don't feel as bad. And we talked about the stories you have covered. How about you tell us about, if you had like a dream story, what would that look like?
I think we've gotten close to covering my dream story. I mean, I would love to cover an election like in DC, in the heart of DC. I think that would be great. I can't really think of like a specific story, but something along the lines of covering an election in DC. Or I also am really fascinated with like foreign correspondence. I think that's really fascinating. So something along those lines.
Interesting. Any like dream person to interview?
I don't know if I could think of a dream person to interview, but like I said, I really enjoy learning how to interview these politicians. There's very much, you have to learn how to interview them.
Yeah.
So I appreciate having that chance to practice in a sense before I enter the real world. So yeah, again, just ending up in DC, I think would be really fascinating, or New York. Just one of those big cities where I'm given those chances to interview those people in power, I think is fascinating.
I know we have here at Quinnipiac the QU in DC program. Have you done that or have any interest?
I haven't done it. I wish I did, but at this point it just kind of slipped away. I just didn't have a chance to get to that.
I know it happens with a lot of students. I think that would have been, I'm sure that's like really populated by like journalism students.
Yeah, it is. And honestly, a large part of the reason that I didn't end up going was Q30 because I really wanted to be in this position that I am now. And although maybe I didn't get to go to DC because I did want to stay for this semester and do my position, I think this position has given me so much that I can't really be that disappointed by not being able to go. So
it's hard because like if you miss a semester, like the out of sight, out of mind, then you lose a little bit. So And it's also interesting what something that also interests me with like interviewing politicians. Do you try to weed through like political answers?
So no matter what, they will give you a political answer. That's just their job. They're the most PR trained people you will ever talk to. And you kind of have to, like, I feel as once you start to practice, like, I've been interviewing politicians since my internship in Greenwich. I was like 17, 18. So learning to interview those, starting with like learning how to interview the local politicians who are typically less political. They're typically they're easier to talk to. So starting with those and kind of seeing it at first with the lower level, and then you work your way up, that really helps. But yeah, it's very difficult. So you do kind of learn how to reword your questions and ask follow-ups. Even if the follow-up sounds exactly the same as your first one, you change like one or two words, you might get a better answer. So it's stuff like that. It's just learning how to ask the questions and follow-ups.
Because I'm sure you get a lot of not as of this moment, or not that I'm aware of. So you kind of have to get through that. And we talk about interviewing other people. I'm going to continue to interview you and ask you, what are some things people don't know about you, like fun facts?
Fun facts. I mean, I said a fun fact earlier. I grew up doing ballet my whole life and playing piano. I also do speak Italian, so that maybe it's not something people know about me. But I don't know. I think those are like the big three.
Any phrases in Italian you like to say?
Die is my favorite one, which means like, oh, come on. I say that one a lot. Allora, which is like, all right. Whatever, like it is what it is. So I think those are two fun ones. I don't know. I can't think of anything else on the top of my head, but those are two of my favorite.
Awesome. And you talk about like loving journalism. What's one thing you love and one thing you strongly dislike, like in general?
One thing I love is like I just telling stories and those interesting stories that people might not think to tell. And that's kind of something you learn as you go, just to find those niche stories. And even the bigger ones are just as important. I like telling stories, and I think that's the baseline of it. One thing I dislike...
It could be like a pet peeve.
I think one thing I dislike is just how heavy it can get on you. You know, a lot of journalists go into this career and they love it, and everyone has a passion for it. It's very much one of those jobs that you have to like it. You have to have a passion to do it. But it can be a lot. Emotionally, mentally, it can be a lot. There's days that you are just constantly working, especially when there's breaking news. At WFSB, I'd be out with reporters and there would be breaking news, so we get sent to a breaker, and then I would get home an hour later. Now, that's just what this career is like. So you kind of have to be okay with that. So you have to, I think the worst part is that you do lose some of your personal life to the job, and that you miss out on your personal life a little bit. But
have you experienced that in any other like situations with the job, like the weight of it all?
Election season. I honestly, this was my first real election season in this role. So because the past one was during COVID. So this election season really showed me what my future career could look like. While it made me fall in love with journalism even more than I already was, it also showed me the kind of negative side of it that I didn't really ever feel before. So I think just that really prepared me in a sense, like, okay, are you sure you want to do this? Because I was so on top of it, I am a student. I am a student. I am still taking all my classes and stuff like that. So all this Q30 stuff is on the side of everything, of all my academics that I still have to take. So all of that combination, that was a lot for me. So just during the month of November, I was very much just trying to remember, like, to take care of myself.
Yeah, because they're kind of like your way you were describing, like the way, like taking, it being hard to like leave behind when you go home. It kind of reminds me of like a lawyer. That makes sense. Do you feel that?
Yes, I think if you think of a lawyer, we're on the opposite side of it. Because in a sense, we are the ones also doing investigations. We're trying to find just as much detail as they are for the most part. So while there's maybe more running around for us, it's very similar to a job like that, to a job that you are constantly working because you're doing such important stories that have such an impact on people. You can't mess up. You can't. So a lot of pressure. But.
Yeah, because if I didn't know you were a journalist, I would probably guess you would be a lawyer. I don't know if it's like the kind of the energy of it all or the presentation of it all, but I kind of feel like there's that overlap. And kind of moving forwards, onwards, you talked about kind of what you want to do, like going to DC. What are some of your hopes and dreams professionally or in general?
Professionally, I would love to end up anchoring reporting. I think that's the end goal, whether that's in Manhattan or in DC. One of the two big cities, I would love to end up reporting, anchoring there. Politics or financial news is my streamline right now. But another niche interest of mine is being a foreign correspondent, being a White House correspondent. I think those are both really interesting. I want to travel, so foreign correspondent is kind of how I can overlap the two.
Paid vacations?
Paid vacations. Covering breaking news, yes, but paid vacations, yeah.
Interesting. What would that job really consist of, foreign correspondent?
It would, from what I've seen, at least, it's very much covering world events, how it's impacting the United States, assuming I stay in the United States. So that job is very much just covering things from Europe, from anywhere else in the world, and how it's impacting here, whether that's a war or something else happening.
Awesome. And kind of moving onwards to the last question, which always sounds funny after heavy topics. What are some of your favorite movies?
My favorite movies. Well, these are going to be very lighthearted considering all the negative things that I've just been talking about. One of my favorite movies, I really like Mamma Mia. I think that's a classic. La La Land. I like musicals a lot. That's the dance background in me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Interstellar is another really good movie that I liked. I think those are big ones. I liked Oppenheimer when that came out. That was I really liked that. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you like history in that sense? I feel.
Yes, I do like history. I wish I did more of history in college, but
yeah, because I was gonna say I feel like there's that overlap with journalism, reporting on stories, etc. And overall, Julie, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank
you. A lot of fun. And do you have any like motivational words or plugs you'd like to give audience before we wrap things up?
I mean, journalism specific, I could say like from experience, like just making like an advice. I don't want to give advice and sit here, but I think like don't stop. Honestly, like there's so many times that I've considered just like changing everything, going to a different major because of how heavy and how overwhelmed everything can get. But like I really think following your passion, it's so cliche, but I think it's worth it. I'm in a position now where I've learned to manage everything at least I think I have, to manage everything that's going on. And I think it's a really rewarding feeling at the end of the day when you put out a good story and you can just sit back and be like, oh, I did something good. So I think just not giving up, just keep trying no matter what, no matter who tells you no matter who tells you that they didn't like it, just don't listen to them.
That's very inspiring. Like you need the thick skin.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, and thank you for getting into like these very interesting topics and taking on journalism from this kind of like all around perspective, because this was great to hear and it really reframed it, because I've talked to other journalists on here and it was great to see like this side of it. And I'm very inspired by all the things you do and the passion you have for what you do. So thank you for sharing that all with us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And as always, this is Ryan Zicast for the Zicast, where everyone has a story, signing off. Thank you so much for watching.